Marky Worthington Podcast all day.
All day.
Dream by night.
Don't buy me a drink. Just give me $10.
All day.
Go down to the strip club with your floppy disk and turn it into a hard drive.
Yeah, right. You'll get fucking thrown out by Big Tony.
We're here to name names and make people feel more ashamed for shit that they're not proud of.
Don't blow it. Keep it simple. Count your money.
No, whatever it is.
Okay, let's get into it. So welcome to the podcast, everybody. Here with, Canberra comedian, but not always from, not recording this here in Canberra. We're actually on the undisclosed remote location, I guess.
On the South Coast.
On the South Coast, that's right.
Yeah.
How about you introduce yourself for the listeners?
Well, I'm Lady Blah Blah, and I like to talk, so let's let her rip.
Yeah, let her rip, okay. Maybe that's the new name for the podcast, Let Her Rip. We're catching up here on the South Coast. Anyone that knows me or has listened to any of the previous episodes, I got fairly strong ties to the South Coast. I grew up down here. Down here to, potentially get some stage time, but although it doesn't look like that at this point, decided it'd be a good time to catch up and talk. Lady Blah Blah and I have had a fairly few good conversations, in the green room before gigs or just off stage conversations. Figured it'd be a good time to actually get some of it down and share with the listeners. We usually go into tangents about random things from over the years, and growing up outside of Australia and all that sort of stuff. There's plenty to talk about. Let's start with that though. You're not originally from Australia. Let's and anyone that understands an accent has probably picked it by now. But let's get into more of your backstory.
Yeah, I've had remember a drunk on the street in Sydney once came up to me and said, "Hey, you're from New Jersey, aren't you?" And I said, "Oh shit, you can't. You can take the Goyle out of New Jersey. You can't take the New Jersey out of the Goyle." But I've been most of my life now in Australia, and very happy for that, especially the way the United States is going.
Yeah.
And but I had a very, very happy little upbringing in the United States on the East Coast, just outside New York, and I am very grateful for the fact that they hadn't invented Ritalin yet when I was a kid, because my God, they would have had me on Ritalin by the age of 5. I got kicked out of 2 kindergartens for being a smartass.
Oh, really?
And nothing's much changed since
Not
then.
many people get kicked out in kindergarten.
Yeah. Well, I called the teacher a liar.
Yeah.
The first time.
Were
Well, she was trying to tell me that my dress was gray and I knew it was purple, and she insisted, and finally I blurted out, "You're a liar," and she sent me out in the hall. And then my mother couldn't figure out why I wouldn't go to school for the next couple of days. But and before that, in the previous school, it was disobedience, I guess, walking out when I should have they wanted me to hold some little kid's hand, hold the boy's hand, and I just walked out and, or I don't know, disobedience of various kinds,
yeah.
Which really did not serve me too well when I then, in desperation, took a job in the public service. That didn't last either.
Yeah. What was the Groucho Marx?
That's right. I finally, in the public service, I after having taken them to the Human Rights Commission and come out on the other side, and then probably can't be the only person who did a PhD to get out of the public service. But after a couple more, returning to the scene of the crime and working for a few places, and again, just no good deed went unpunished from the public service, I reached what I call the Groucho Marx inflection point. I wouldn't work for any agency that would hire me. And that was it. Basta.
Man, I like when we hit that point in life where you decide that you're better off without it. Had you always been public servant before that?
No. I hated the thought of working in an office because my mother worked in an office.
Yeah.
I never wanted to be a teacher. Again, I wound up teaching high school for a while. couldn't stand that because it was too much like being a parent. Somebody always needed their ass wiped or smacked.
Yeah.
And couldn't handle that. Even the senior secondary, the colleges and the ACT, they were kind of okay. But the last time I was reduced to working as a relief teacher in a high school in Canberra, teaching mathematics. I can remember sitting in the car park at Deakin High School crying at 3 o'clock because they did not understand the music of the spheres, which is what mathematics is all about. I've got a 4-year degree in mathematics.
Yeah.
And these kids were so arrogant and disdainful. We were doing some kind of task and they were adding 7 and 5 on their fingers to get 12. It broke my heart. These are like 15-year-olds who couldn't add 7 and 5 together.
Yeah.
And arrogant thinking, anyway, no, can't teach mathematics, did okay teaching media for a while. I've taught all kinds of things, those who can do, those who can't teach, right?
Yeah. What about those who can't teach?
Well, we go blah, blah, blah.
We do podcasts.
And well, that's right. So in fact, look, I've only ever been told I'm good at 2 things in life, okay?
Yeah.
And that's writing and fucking. So inevitably, I wind up writing about fucking because I haven't worked out how I can fuck about writing. Okay? And so, yes, I do write. I've discovered there is this whole genre called erotic fiction.
Yeah.
But I haven't got much of imagination, so I have to write erotic nonfiction.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of research, and there is this thing called action research.
Yeah.
So I'm right into it. It's okay. Works for me.
Normally the victims of my writing are only in the audience members. But yeah, it's an interesting. Actually, you mentioned about adding numbers, right? This is something that I've picked up on more recently. It's something I've always thought about, but it's sort of, I guess, with the internet, people talk about things more, so you understand different perspectives. Sometimes that's good. Most of the time, that's negative. If you were to add 7 and 5, right? And I didn't know that there's different ways that obviously people do that, different mindsets. Okay. So what I do, for some reason, this is how my mind works. If I was to picture everything's in groups of 10, right? So 7 to get to 10 needs 3.
Yeah.
So I chop 3 off the 5, chuck that on top of the 7. Now that's 10. Now I've got 2 left from the original 5. So I've got a 10 and a 2. That's 12.
Sounds like hard work, the way you're describing it.
I don't know why I do that.
Yeah.
But for some reason, that's the method I take for adding numbers.
Okay.
So I will sort it into piles of 10.
And then add and minus. Yeah. I've done that with long strings of numbers. But you know what Lewis Carroll called, the guy who wrote Alice in Wonderland.
Okay.
What he called
heroin addict.
Well, that's part of it, yeah. What he called the 4 operations of arithmetic.
What were they?
Ambition, distraction, uglification, and derision.
Derision?
Yeah.
And what's 2 things? What's derision and what's uglification?
Well, uglification is you make things uglier.
Yeah.
Right? Derision is when you're... casting aspersion, calling something negatively, see,
right.
Negative stuff. Now, you know how I do the word of the week sometimes?
Yeah.
Okay, now the one I want to use is hedonistic. Do you know what that means? No? Hedonism? That's, I got to look it up the precise, but hedonism is when you give in to all your worldly pleasures and delights and sensuality and all of that sort of thing.
Yeah.
A hedonistic person sort of doesn't care about the consequences, whatever. Now, I've worked out that at this late age in life that if I do whatever makes me happy, which is basically hedonistic, that I only do whatever makes me happy, and if what I do that makes me happy doesn't make other people unhappy or it doesn't make them angry or pissed off or want to take out a gun or slap me in the face, then I should always only ever be doing what makes me happy. Isn't that good?
Yeah.
Okay? Bearing in mind that I don't want to do things that, the kind of things that make me happy are not usually the kind of things that
Make
would...
others.
Yeah, I mean, I don't go around, insulting people or things like that. So therefore, we should all always be doing whatever makes us happy.
Yeah.
Not what the government or the morality tells us we should be doing.
Yeah.
Like, generally, society's got it all backwards. Take the example of nude beaches. I mean, at the moment, it's like you can't, anybody who's ever swum in the ocean.
Shout out to Myrtle Beach.
Yes, I've been there. You always want to, swimming naked is the best possible thing you can, it feels so good, right? But at the moment, it's like, oh no, you can only go to a certain place and do that. But now we know that's wrong. That's ass over tit. Because if you wear a kazi, you're emitting microplastics into the ocean. And that's bad. Therefore, all beaches should be nude beaches with an area roped off at the end for people who want to wear kazis, and we should shame them. I think that's the way it should be.
It's the opposite to what it currently is.
Absolutely, and a whole lot of things are like that. We should really be doing whatever makes us feel good. That's a fair enough philosophy, I reckon.
I think so. I honestly think that we rely too heavily on tradition and not what we think is best for us.
Well, you're echoing Nietzsche, the philosopher Nietzsche. Now, I've only read one book actually by Nietzsche, which someone said, oh, read this one, Ecce Homo, it's the one that's most accessible. Well, it was kind of like the guy was on something when he wrote it, and it's really repetitive, really negative, really horrible in a lot of ways. I reckon Nietzsche, but it's criticizing the whole world order.
Yeah.
And even though his philosophy was twisted by his sister, that's right, who edited his works and turned into a neo-Nazi kind of thing. Yeah. Because she was married to a Nazi. He actually didn't like the Germans. He was actually very favorable towards the Jews, but not towards the Germans. So it was exactly the opposite of the way we think of Nietzsche. But he said the church, all of that, everything that tells us how to behave is keeping us from realizing what we really are. And that the people who break through that are the Übermensch, or the full people, who the superhumans are the people who break out of that stuff. And I'll tell you where I see this is, of course, in people's sexual behavior, because the first thing you want to do if you want to control people is you control their sexual behavior, what they eat, how they dress, how they can talk. You put those pinchers on. Yeah. And then people think, oh, this is what I have to do, this is what I have to do. Whereas the people who actually throw that stuff away and say, well, actually, no, I'll do what I want. Yeah. They're the true freedom fighters in the world, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
And so anyway, I've always been in trouble for that reason. Did not fit in the public service. Even when I did really good things that met all their requirements, then that's when I got slapped around, So.
You did mention no good deed went unpunished.
That's right. That's right.
I think that also a lot of people don't bother to question why they do things. A lot of people just... How often do you hear people say, like, I've always done it this way? Like, it's uncommon, but it takes someone to actually question, why are we doing it like this, for someone to do that. The amount of times I've started a new job and had a fresh pair of eyes over a process and said, why do we even do that? Until someone says, oh, I don't know. It's like, well, why did it take someone to ask for you to, daily, I ask myself, why do I do this? Like, everything in my life that I do, I ask, is there a better and quicker way of doing this? Is there a reason that I'm doing this at all?
Or do I even want to be doing this? And why do I think I need to be doing this? Could I be doing something else? Yes. And that's the tough one. People like the security of knowing, things are reliable in some way. But we live in a world now where disruption is the new normal. What we're going through. And, I do climate change jokes, a hilarious topic, but it's just gotten more and more obvious that, excuse me, puss, that the world is tilting over into a very, very unstable kind of place. And the only real relief from that I see is having fun and being nice to people. That's about all you can hang on to.
It's a quote. I think this is actually a quote from Charlie Manson.
Of all people.
He said, "Do you want me to be the guy you're trying to make me?" And I find a lot of relationships are like that. I find a lot of people will, and blokes my age that I've spoken to, even blokes older than me, that have been in a relationship to the point where they became the person that the partner would want them to be, and then neither of them wanted to be that person.
Yeah. That's a. I also used to, when I was younger, I also used to think that without another person, I didn't have an identity because I was always becoming whatever I was in a couple.
Yeah.
Rather
with the
than
other half.
Yeah. Whereas now I've realized I don't give a shit. It's sort of like.
You always felt like that? You just didn't have the empowerment to do it?
I think I've always found my own way, bubbling along, bouncing along, stumbling along, doing things that, I never planned a career or anything like that. I never did any kind of education with a view towards, that's going to get me a job, or that's the path I want to find. I was just earning a living somewhere along the way. And I worked out once that somehow I have spent more years after high school, I've spent more years in full-time education than I have in full-time work.
Oh, okay.
And I think, pretty good. Because I'm a person who likes learning. So I've done a lot of studying, but I don't really know anything. This is the so aside from the times I've worked as a waitress or a go-go dancer or something like that, I basically have only ever been paid for reading, writing, and speaking. That's which means it's very, doesn't, it just vanishes in the air. What does all that stuff count for?
Yeah. Although I think that an education influences you whether you realise or not. Like, for example, people talk about common sense, thinking that you're born with it. Whereas a lot of things that people do, obviously, is from their education or their learning, and then they portray, like, for example, you look at third world countries where they don't get an education for free. And people are like, why don't they just stop having kids? Because there's this idea of, like, that they know things that we know. They know what we know. Because the thing is, people can only look at something from their own perspective. So
and experience,
right? So they will, like, look at someone else's experience through their eyes and not through the person that they're talking about. So, someone that might know how to filter drinking water and how to like grow crops or whatever, might say, why don't people that don't have water and food know how to do that? Well, it's because they like
They don't
it's
know
not
what
common.
they don't know, and all, of course, and they're locked into ways of doing things and all. But also, you can't help but think that the way our world is now, and everything is gadgetry and this, and we're kind of cut off from the natural world, that we've lost a lot of ability to perceive the world as it really is around us somehow. And I mean, that's why I guess I do consider it part of my Teutonic upbringing, my German background, the Black Forest, the whole thing. Always need to have more trees around me than people.
Yeah.
You know, I really need to get my hands in the soil. I need to do that. I need to have that. I was in Belconnen the other week, where the Labour Club is, and there's all these big buildings and it's closed in and up, and I felt kind of claustrophobic, and I felt it was really ugly. And I felt I need to get away from that, and that's why I have this place. Just look at all the trees, and just
still submerge yourself in nature.
Absolutely, and there is a whole kind of gardening called nude gardening. I didn't know about it. I haven't invented it, but why not?
Yeah.
That's one way to keep the leeches from grabbing hold. You can see them.
Yeah, exactly, and they can see you too.
Yeah, so that's right.
To watch out.
Yeah.
The you mentioned before growing up at the start of the podcast. You also touched on some of your work as a go-go dancer. Let's talk some more about that. Now, from what I understand, that was in a similar timeline of when you first came to Australia? Or?
Well, I came to Australia. I was only about 22 when I came to Australia, and I was married to an academic who had a job at Sydney University. I met him while I was finishing my maths degree, and he was finishing his PhD in psychology. And he was a rat man. He used to do experiments with drugs and rats and things. And I worked for a while over the summer holidays as a go-go dancer in university when I wasn't working as a waitress. And
explain that to people that don't know.
Is it that long ago that people don't know what a go-go dancer is? That wore a little costume with little fringes on it and things like that, and you'd go in a bar and get up on a table and and at that time it was $5 an hour, which was about 3 times what I could get as a waitress. And it was a bit of a fun. It was a lark, etc. And then, but like many things, I've evolved. When I was a kid, I did ballet, and then became a cheerleader in high school, and never got invited to the prom, unfortunately. Was always a bookworm, always the kind of poetry, that sort of thing. Then went to university. Was mildly anorexic as a teenager, which has stood me in good stead in old age. And a little bit of vanity doesn't hurt, And came to Australia and almost immediately joined a dance drama group in Sydney, the Margaret Barr Dance Drama Group. There were a bunch of sort of left-wing theatrical performances involving dance. I'm still friends with some of those people from those days. Some have passed away, unfortunately. And we would put on things like about Pablo Neruda and Daisy Bates and different characters in history. And that was run by an old Hungarian woman who went right back through European days to the Bejar Dance Company. She had links to those people in Europe, So that was a lot of fun doing that. And then I did a year of, left my husband in Sydney after about a year because...
Had you moved over together or?
Yeah. We got married in New Jersey, had a year in Vancouver because he had a position there. that he didn't stay there. University of British Columbia was beautiful. Vancouver was beautiful then. Then we moved to the Middle East and had a year in Beirut, Lebanon. Before their civil war, Lebanon was called the Paris of the Middle East then. And I saw balls of hashish the size of your fist.
Yeah.
You know, in those days you could buy amphetamines over the counter.
Jesus.
So the Middle East was kind of interesting, a little bit scary. When we were living in a penthouse on the 13th floor, and Nasser, who was the president of Egypt, died of natural causes, nothing untoward, and there were about 5 days of gunfire in the city in Lebanon, random gunfire, about 8 people got killed, and we were kind of like creeping around off the balconies on our penthouse because you could hear gunshot. We didn't leave the place for about 5 days.
Jeez.
And that was peaceful. That was a peaceful situation.
Yeah.
So anyway, then he got a position at Sydney University and we moved to Sydney. So I lived on 3 continents in 3 years.
Yeah.
As the trailing spouse, you know.
Yeah.
You know, what was I doing? And I had a degree, but no real experience. Because my degree was in mathematics and foreign languages, and basically I was good for nothing, and except becoming a high school teacher. So I finally got into that, which is where I met my second husband, and who was an engineer who'd come out from Canada. And you know, in Canada, in Newfoundland, that's a island off the east coast of Canada.
Okay, I didn't know that, no.
And basically a long fishing kind of history of that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And in Canada, the way we tell jokes, I guess, about Queenslanders.
Yeah.
Or in the United States, they tell jokes about Southerners.
Yeah.
Well, in Canada, they tell jokes, Newfie jokes.
Yeah.
About Newfoundlanders.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I married one. I married a Newfie joke. So that didn't work out too well. Straight out of the shipping news that him and his, but he was an engineer, very smart guy, but very neurotic. So anyway, so then married him and had a couple kids, and strange situation. Anyway, eventually moved on from that. I've kind of ended every relationship I've ever been in. You know, I kind of have brought them all to a halt. And
is that because you just realised that you're not into it, or what?
I don't know.
Is there anything in particular, like a trend?
Well, must be a trend, you know. I just sort of moved on, I guess. Well, there were, long stories, but basically haven't found somebody who I could really feel totally comfortable with. But they all served the first one was about getting out of New Jersey. In retrospect.
Yeah.
Because he opened up my world in a lot of ways and was very intellectual, very into the
travel and
literature and things like that. A real free thinker.
Yeah.
And very, very, in those days was free love in Sydney. There was a lot going on. It was like swingers without the name.
Yeah.
It was happening. It was all happening.
Before the name.
Yeah, before they had a name for it. So the second one was really about having children, and I'd known him for a long time because we'd done teacher training together, and he was an engineer, and he was a hippie, and we were going to grow food together, and blah 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 blah. We went and lived in Newfoundland, and built this igloo and things like that. Unfortunately, he was very neurotic, and so that eventually I had to bring that to a close.
Yeah.
And then I fell in with an Aussie guy, and that went on for like 27 years. And then I realized it was just not. It served its purpose at the time. It kept me from. Men have been a terrible distraction in my life. That.
So they kept
me off the streets.
Yeah, yeah. Kept you on the straight and narrow.
That's right. So. I can do monogamy. I did it for decades. What I don't do now, I don't do celibacy masquerading as monogamy. I can keep that one. That gig is over. Don't do that one. So anyway, so it's been a long story. You can't really condense it into thing, but I've wandered around and done this and that, and joined the public service and did a PhD and a postdoc, and so I got more degrees than a thermometer, and I am totally unemployable. And that's why I did them. He goes, why work for a living if you can just go blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
for free, And no, so it's been good, and somehow I have, I'm now free. I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
And that's and I intend to. I will do whatever the fuck I like in the years remaining to me, because I think I've earned the points,
Yeah.
And that's it. And I'm harmless. I'm basically a harmless person.
Yeah.
And but watch out for harmless people.
Yeah.
And I think one of my lines is, for better or for worse, I'm an intellectual. Now, that's not something you say, I think when I grow up I'll be an intellectual. It's not, it's like, I think I'll have freckles. It's not the way it works. But to me, an intellectual is someone for whom the world of ideas is a real place. That's why they lock them up. These people need to be kept off the streets, In Pol Pot's Cambodia, you could get killed just for wearing eyeglasses.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Because if you wear eyeglasses, maybe you can read. If you can read, maybe you can think. And if you can think, maybe you can speak or write. And if you can do that, maybe you're going to challenge us. So, off with their heads, right? But, so I've my natural gravitation is towards ideas and thoughts and all that sort of thing. So one of my academic positions even came with a complementary gender reassignment. When they offered me to become a postdoctoral fellow. I said, yeah, I'll take the fellowship, but you can keep the gender change. I'll stick with this one.
What was that? What was that for?
Postdoctoral fellow in electronic commerce.
Yeah, and whereabouts was that based?
At RMIT University in Melbourne.
Jesus.
Yeah. And so I went down there, let's do it. And because I got the PhD, so I that's right, I wrote a book with an academic guy, decided that, this academic stuff is pretty cool. Hadn't done anything since I had a master's degree in linguistics from Macquarie University. And so I never really wanted to do a PhD, because I thought I don't want to become so specialized, But then I found out about these PhD scholarships, and I just co-authored a book with this guy on Australia's aging society. And I thought, it's pretty cool. I liked the research, I liked the writing. He said I was doing good. So I ran into a woman who had just finished a PhD, who I knew from the University of Canberra. And she said, I've just done a PhD, had this scholarship, and da-da-da. And because we're both outside the dressing rooms in Target. Oh, how are you, Ruth? Da-da-da, how are you? Yeah, da. And she was an older woman. And I went home that night. I said, I've worked out how I'm going to get out of the public service. I'm going to use the book that I wrote to get a PhD scholarship. And 3 years later, I was getting, so I got 3 years leave without pay from the public service. That's right, because I'd taken them to the Human Rights Commission on indirect discrimination charges.
Yeah.
That didn't go down too well. That did nothing for my career. I must be the only person in the public service who acted down for someone else. You get act up.
Yeah.
I acted down for somebody who was on leave. And they never got a promotion in the public service, never even applied for one, really. Just wanted to be left alone. And so I thought, no, I'll do this. I'll do a PhD. So I knew nothing about what a PhD involved or anything. And 3 years later, I was graduating, which I didn't even know. Nobody finishes a PhD in 3 years.
Yeah.
But I had 3 years, and I was still a single parent. I still had a kid to support, so I did that. And that was fun. It was a lot of fun. And that's when I worked out how really fucked up the public service is. So now I just that's right. Now I do climate change presentations.
Yeah.
I'm one of the Al Gore groupies.
Al Gore groupie.
Yeah.
Are you able to talk more about the case or not really?
Well, it was basically when they brought in performance pay, and I was working 4 days a week. And I was always a person who, because I was a single parent, that I would show up like at 8 in the morning maybe.
Yeah.
But I was out of there at 5 because I had to go home to kids and all. And they had all these senior officers floating around, and they're working late, and they're making a big deal out of things, and da. But I was always like clockwork. I was out of there. The newsletter, I was a journalist, and the newsletter came out like clockwork. There were no complaints, etc. But then when they did this performance pay, they had to set up a bell curve, didn't they? So the assistant secretary said, "Oh, well, you're not going to get performance pay, Karen, because you don't stay after 5 like the other senior officers." I said, "Wait a minute, that's not the way it works. It's not on like the number of hours you work. It's like what have I done? What have I produced? And is there any problems with that or anything like that?" So because I saw my role as empowering women with information through this newsletter and, about government information for women, etc., I had indirectly empowered myself because I knew about the Human Rights Commission and all that sort of thing. I was talking to somebody, the Human Rights Commission. I said, they're not going to give me performance pay. What the hell is this all about? And this person said, well, that's a violation of ILO 156, which is the, that Australia is signatory to International Labour Organization, because workers with family responsibilities, you're a single parent, you would be not as able to work extended hours as a man. So that's an indirect discrimination. And I put in a complaint and it got accepted. And it was like the letter came through to the office saying, you've got a complaint from one of your employees in the Office of the Status of Women in the Prime Minister's Department of indirect discrimination. And their jaws dropped.
Yeah, jaw dropped.
And with me, it was like Christmas, And then went through a long process of, dragging things out, analyzing everything I'd done, and they brought in people and blah, blah, blah. And in the end, we mediated. They had to give me a bit of money. I got the performance pay twice, so they couldn't, I had no disadvantage to prove, really. But then, of course, I was put in a room by myself with nothing to do, like a blue bottle in a jar.
Yeah.
And that's when I took on a contract to write a book. So I was working 4 days a week in the public service and 3 days a week on a book with an academic guy. And then then I found out about these PhD scholarships, and then I said, I'm out of here, And then again, so within 3 years, after not having studied for 20 years, I turned out a PhD. I was doing international conference papers and publishing things and all that kind of thing. I did okay. And it was never ask anybody about their PhD, because that's a hide into nowhere. The title of it was, Does Democracy Scale? A fractal model for the role of interactive technologies in democratic policy processes. So once you hear that, I'm sorry, there's nothing more to say. What do you say? It was wonderful. I enjoyed it. It was the richest experience of my life. It was like feeding me, honey and mangoes all day.
Yeah.
Because it helped me to understand the world. It helped me understand my place in the world, and it was, and I did really well at it, and basically, I got through on my ability to write, and it's so at the end, I worked out that a PhD is basically it's a 3-year take-home exam.
Yeah.
And you get to make up the questions, and you get to decide how you answer the questions. But could you please throw in some original research and tell us why it's worth doing? You can do that, you got a PhD.
Yeah.
Actually, I got something to show you.
Yeah.
Please flip over the tape to side B to hear the rest of this podcast.
You were asking about New Jersey.
After the break, we've returned.
Yeah.
Bit of show and tell.
Bit of show and tell. One of my high school buddies,
Yep.
who then became a colonel or something in the U.S. Army. Oh God, is he very American Army type? There's something about him, but he was a kind of runty, geeky guy in high school, and we were in French class together.
Yeah.
And he contacted me recently, sent me a copy of my high school yearbook from my junior year in high school.
Yeah.
Which is like a blast from the past. And not only that, he said, "Oh, I've got this thing for you. Can I send it to you?" He sent it to me. Now, and I said, why did you have this? He said, "Well, actually, I bought it on eBay. Somebody was selling it." I thought, but this is my high school yearbook because it's all to me.
Yeah.
And this is a real blast from the past. And so there's names in here and people and teachers and stuff that I'd forgotten. That's the way they did these things.
Yeah, right. So it's your actual high school yearbook.
Yeah, and the only thing I can figure is when we packed up my mother's house to put her in a nursing home and had garage sales, some of this stuff vanished. So I think somebody stole it. And because I don't remember selling it, but I wasn't going to drag all this stuff back to Australia anyhow. And I'm in here somewhere in the junior year, but it's just hilarious. It's hilarious that
That's really cool.
Well, and this is how seriously the American high school thing is taken. I don't have my glasses on. I could find anyway. And then there's a picture of me in here as a cheerleader somewhere. And the only name that's missing from that list of cheerleaders is mine. There's like 12 people in the photograph and only 11 names.
Yeah, right.
But so that's every year they put out these yearbooks. Yeah, it's wild.
Well, so, like you hear a lot in like American TV shows about the yearbooks.
Yeah.
So it's
look at that hardbound. That's the school. It was a long time ago. But
yeah.
Anyway.
Interesting. It's exactly how you'd picture some of the images in there.
Yeah, very, very dated.
What I might do is, if we find, we'll go through after this, and maybe I'll take a couple of photos of the book, and I'll just put them here.
Yeah, bit of fun
in the video version for anyone that's watching. If you're listening to the audio version, go over to YouTube, Marky Worthington Comedy, and you'll be able to see the video. That sample that I'll put in here. But yeah, that's really interesting. Like we have yearbooks here, but they're not quite to that level. They're just sort of like more of a magazine type.
Yeah, and I don't know if they still do them. I mean, this is going back a long time, and but it's the pictures and the names and stuff. It brings back the whole kind of thing of that one was dorky, and she was really all the guys were chasing after her, and. And these ones were a clique and all of that sort of thing. But, it's because I don't think about that. I'm in contact with nobody from those times. Nobody.
So so does going through that remind you of people? Like, I mean, since it's been, the years have gone on, do you look back and think, I wonder what that person's still doing? Do you ever reconnect with anyone?
Well, only rarely, like the guy who sent me this.
Yeah.
I connect more with people that I knew in the my early days in Australia.
Yeah.
And not a lot. And as my best friend from childhood has now died in the U.S. and I've only got a few cousins left there. My whole family's gone. I don't really have much to link me there anymore.
Yeah. So you've spent more of your years in Australia.
Oh yeah, vast majority of my life in Australia.
Yeah. Do you still have memories of the US?
Oh yeah, I had a lovely childhood.
Yeah.
You know, there was open land in the suburbs. We could play. When I was in high school, I'd play hooky. When we played hooky, we'd go to Greenwich Village in New York. You know, the Empire.
The Pope's there, isn't it?
The who?
The Pope of Greenwich Village. I don't know. It's a movie title anyway.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
But you know, from a hill in my town, you can see the Empire State Building.
Yeah, right.
That was so. I'd go off to the museums or whatever in New York, and then I went to university in middle of New Jersey, New Brunswick.
Yeah.
Was a state university there, and but I was gone by the time I was 22, and only came back to live in the U.S. for a couple of years in, I guess, the late 70s, early 80s. Lived in San Francisco for a year. That was good. Lived in Canada for a year. Lived in Vancouver for a year. Lived in the Middle East for a year. I lived in Melbourne for a couple of years. Sydney for 7 years. But then it's been Canberra, you know, and the South Coast.
I wish I could say you're the first person from New Jersey on the podcast, but towards the end of last year, I had an artist that did the Goosebumps book series. His name's Tim Jacobus.
Oh, yeah.
And he actually did a video call with me from New Jersey. So we had a conversation, and that was just a score that I had because, you know, during the lockdowns, it was hard to get guests in person. And I figured if I was going to do a video call, it opens up the entire world as guests. So I reached out to him and he hit me back.
Oh, nice.
But there's a couple. So, like, I listened to a podcast called, it used to be called The Church of What's Happening Now. It's now, the presenter from that now just does his own podcast. But he's an actor and a comedian called Joey Diaz. And he's from New Jersey. He's not born in New Jersey. He's from Cuba originally, but he grew up there. His mum had a bar there when he was a kid. It was he's got stories, and in his podcast, he talks about playing hooky, and that's how I know that term, because here we just call it wagging or whatever. But yeah, he's got some crazy stories. He's got a story about one of his friends' mums was really good looking. He had a crush on her. Her name was Faye, and he said that they used to play in the neighborhood, and she'd come out on the balcony and watch them play, and they'd watch her watching them, and but her husband, who was older, used to keep an eye on her because he knew that she was watching the younger ones. But then he said that he had a crush on her, and one day he decided to make a move. And he just said, Faye, he said when he's a kid, he's like a 15-year-old kid, says, Faye, can I kiss you? And she goes, no, Joey, you're a kid, you know. Anyway, years later, so Joey, this is when Joey's a kid, right? So he's like in his 50s now. Faye's still alive, but she's in her 80s. And his friend, it's his mum, she was staying at the house, and she called him up. He called his friend. He says, hey, I put mum on the phone. She goes, Joey, you still got that crush on me?
Good on her. That's cute.
But the thing is, he has a daughter, like a young daughter, and they visit each other and that sort of thing. And he still is in contact with a lot of his friends from when he was there. He went to LA for a while for acting and comedy and all that sort of stuff. Got in at the Comedy Store, all that sort of shit. And I'm not doing his story justice, but this is a brief overview. And he's recently moved back to New Jersey, and he was saying that he feels like he's, like you said at the start of the podcast, he's always been a New Jersey kid. Yeah. You know? He's originally from Cuba, so he has like he has more of like a general American accent, not like a thick
Latino, Spanish one,
Yeah, but he's got a really good, he's got, anyway, whatever. If people like that sort of stuff, it's Uncle Joey's joint. But if you, I guess if you move multiple places, you kind of pick up something from everywhere you go.
Well, you know, the Sopranos was filmed based in New Jersey.
Yeah.
And in fact, in one episode, Ralphie in The Sopranos mentions my hometown of Karlstadt.
Oh, right.
Just before he kills his girlfriend.
Yeah, yeah.
So, oh yeah, honey, we're going to buy you a nice little house in Karlstadt, and then bang. Karlstadt being a lot of German stuff there.
Yeah.
The town was settled by Germans. There was when I was a little kid, the place where the town hall is now was actually a German beer garden.
Yeah. Right.
The whole block had
Yeah.
tables and things set up. They would celebrate the German festivals and things. Went to a German sports club with my parents swimming up in the countryside. A lot of Italians. Now it's more Latinos, more Indians, a lot of Koreans. It's sort of changed a lot, but it's always been a big melting pot.
Yeah.
It's always been a good area in that sort of thing, but it's gotten more intense. And no, I thought roller skating, ice skating, sleigh riding, bicycle riding, all of that, climbing trees. It was a really nice, healthy, normal kind of upbringing, I thought. In those days before Kennedy got killed, before the feminist thing started, before the black movement started up again. I mean, the civil rights thing has always been there, but before a whole lot of things really kicked in, it was that time after the Second World War in the United States when everything was hunky-dory, except for the threat of nuclear war. I remember doing air raid practices in the basement of the school. But
At this school?
No, the primary school.
The before high school,
yeah. So it was a fairly innocent time in those days, I think.
Yeah.
Before, kids nowadays can't remember what it was like not to be plugged into your phone all the time. But in those days, it was a party line, but it was the outdoor stuff, and it wasn't all fast food and everything. And it's humble. If we went out to dinner, it was because it was a special occasion. It wasn't like you're going out all the time. And so it was I was a tomboy. I was climbing trees and all that.
Yeah.
But I was also a bookworm. I was a tomboy bookworm.
Yeah.
And
Mix of both.
Yeah, and had my little dolls and my German dollhouse furniture, and I thought it was a very happy upbringing,
Yeah.
Yeah. Except my father was very jealous, so there'd be screaming and hollering and
Jealous as in?
Jealous if my mother danced with somebody at the German club or that sort of thing. There was really, the police came a couple times.
Oh, that level. Yeah.
Yeah, but it wasn't violent. It was just a lot of screaming and hollering. The emotional side of it, I guess.
Were your parents both German?
He came from German background.
Yeah.
And that's why they met in the same street where there were a lot of German settlers. But he also had a bit of English and Irish in him.
Yeah.
But German background as well.
Yeah.
So grew up with a lot of German background.
Did they speak German at home?
No, because my father didn't speak German.
Okay, didn't.
But my mother would speak it with the relatives and things.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And you mentioned before that you speak multiple languages. What languages?
Well, I did French in high school and got advanced placement in university for that. And so I studied French literature for a couple years. So I was writing exams in French. Yeah. Then I studied German in university as well. Studied a little bit more German when I lived in Vancouver. Then I did a year of Italian at Sydney University, and then went to Italy for a couple months. So the Italian was there. And then I studied Spanish, mostly in Canberra, I guess. I went, and I spent 7 weeks in Costa Rica studying Spanish also. So not I wouldn't say fluent in any of them really, but I can get by. Yeah, I can get by. I've been able to help Italians on the street in Spain asking me for directions. You know?
Good.
And so I can get by, and I love languages. But yeah. But my English is really good.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's, see, mine's terrible.
You get by.
I can speak Australian pretty good.
Yeah,
but my English is terrible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or as I say, no bloody good. What's your, tell me something that took a minute to, like, adjust to when coming to Australia. Was there any, like, terms or things that you remember from, you know, things that we call, like, slang words or anything like that?
Oh, a lot of that. You know, I was a little bit... I remember thinking Australians were fairly taciturn when I first came here, that they kind of were a little bit on the quiet side. I remember seeing the English influence was still quite strong in Sydney in those days, before Sydney had become quite as multicultural as it is now. I remember feeling like a migrant, you know. I've been feeling it was a little bit challenging, but... And that it was cold. Sydney was cold in the winter because they didn't have heating.
Yep.
You know, that I was used to having heating
Everywhere,
you know, that sort of thing. But and that it rained a lot. Now it rains a lot more. But the plants. I remember the plants because things grow in Sydney that you'd only have as houseplants in North America, on the East Coast. And I remember the things like the choco vines growing around the old Harold Park in Glebe, and the frangipani trees and lemon trees overlapping the back lanes and things. All of that I found, you know, really, really nice in Sydney.
Do you think that appeals to your gardening side of things?
Oh yeah. I've always grown things, you know, at whatever little level I could. I've always had a garden, and you know, and it gives me great pleasure, you know, that and I wouldn't call myself a fancy gardener though, but you know, over the years I reckon I've developed my own brand of gardening.
Yep.
You know, I call it permaculture for people who don't read books or go to courses. You know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So.
Well, that's trademarked now, so it exists on the internet at least.
That's right. Permaculture for people who don't read books or go to courses. That's it. Stick it in the ground, wish it good luck, and sprinkle a few snail pellets on it.
Yep.
And then eat it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's before the snails do.
Yep.
Yeah.
So.
Well, let's wrap it up with that. We've nearly done an hour, so that's it's flown by. I would say keep an eye out for any new content from Lady Blah Blah. Where can people find your YouTube videos that you mentioned?
Lady Blah Blah Canberra Comic.
Over on YouTube and just on Facebook. Do you have a Facebook page for your comedy?
I think that's Lady Blah Blah as well.
Yeah. But
I'm not real good on the social media.
That's fine. People will find it. People will build it and they will come. I'm going to, as I mentioned before, put up a couple of happy snaps from the yearbook in the video episode, but I might even clip it for my social media as well, just as a short video sample. So yeah, cheers everyone for tuning in. Remember, we got the basement open mics on the third Tuesday of every month. Lady Blah Blah regularly attends those, so come along and check it out. Yeah, cheers everyone for tuning in, and catch you at the next episode. Thank you.
Don't buy me a drink. Just name names.
Yeah, right. Big Tony. You'll get fucking thrown out
At a strip club with your floppy disk.
all day. Make people feel shame for shit all day.
Don't blow
Turn it
it.
into a hard drive.
Yeah, right. You'll get fucking we're here
Keep it simple. Count your money.
that they're not proud of.
Just give me $10.
Hey, right.
One of my neighbors said she's worked that I'm a hippie.
How long did it take you to work that
Exactly.
out? Very observant. Here's your neighbour Sherlock Holmes all of a sudden.